The night my mother died, the walls of the hospital room felt like they were closing in on me. The lights above her bed flickered softly, casting shadows across her pale face. I sat beside her, holding her hand, afraid that if I let go, even for a second, she would slip away faster. Her skin was cold, but her grip was still warm, still fighting. She looked at me with tired eyes and tried to smile, the kind of smile only a mother gives when she wants to be strong for her child. "Don't worry," she whispered, her voice barely louder than my heartbeat. "You'll be okay." I wanted to believe her, but fear sat heavy in my chest. I had never imagined a world without her. She was my safe place, my shield, the reason I survived a house that often felt more like a battlefield than a home. My father stood near the window, his back turned to us, staring outside, as if the night sky held answers he didn't care to share. He hadn't held her hand, he hadn't whispered love, he just waited. When the machines finally went silent, it didn't feel real. I shook her hand gently, begging her to wake up, to tell me this was a cruel mistake. But the nurse's eyes said what no one else could. My mother was gone. I broke. I cried into her chest, apologizing for things that didn't need forgiveness, times I argued, days I was too busy to sit with her, moments I took her love for granted. My father cleared his throat behind me, uncomfortable, impatient. "We should go," he said flatly. "There's nothing more to do here, nothing more to do." As if her life had been a task on a checklist, the funeral came and went like a blur of black clothes and hollow condolences. People told me how strong I was, how brave I looked. They didn't see how every breath felt borrowed. My father accepted sympathy with stiff nods, already discussing paperwork and arrangements with distant relatives. I stood beside him, invisible. That night we returned to the house, her house. The smell of her cooking still lingered in the kitchen. Her slippers were by the sofa. Her laughter echoed in every corner, haunting and beautiful. I went to my room and curled up on my bed, hugging her scarf like it could bring her back. I didn't sleep. 3 days later, my father called me into the living room. He sat in his favorite chair, legs crossed, arms folded, his expression unreadable. The same living room where my mother used to hum softly while folding laundry, where she defended me every time his voice grew sharp. "Sit down," he said. My stomach tightened. "What is it, Dad?" He didn't soften. "Now that your mother is gone, things are going to change." My heart skipped. "Change how?" "This house is too quiet," he said coldly, "and frankly, you don't belong here anymore." The words didn't register at first. "I don't belong, you're grown," he continued. "Your mother made you weak, dependent. I won't be responsible for you." Tears burned my eyes. "She just died. This is my home." He leaned forward, his voice sharp. "It was her home, not yours, and she's not here to protect you anymore." That sentence crushed something inside me. "I want you out by tonight," he said. "Pack your things." I stood there, shaking. "Where am I supposed to go?" He shrugged. "Figure it out. Life isn't kind." I went to my room in a daze. My hands trembled as I packed clothes, photos, pieces of a life my mother had carefully built for me. With every item I folded, memories flooded back, her brushing my hair, her late night advice, her quiet promises that I'd always be safe. When I dragged my suitcases to the door, my father didn't look at me. As I stepped outside, the door closed behind me. And in that moment, I realized I hadn't just lost my mother. I had lost my home, too. The night air felt colder than it should have as I stood outside the house, my suitcases beside me like proof that I no longer belonged anywhere. The porch light flickered above my head, the same light my mother used to turn on whenever I came home late, just to make sure I could see my way. Now it only highlighted how alone I was. I stared at the door, half expecting it to open again, half hoping my father would come out and tell me this was all a mistake. He didn't. I walked down the driveway slowly, each step heavier than the last. With every footfall, memories followed me. My mother waving from the window, calling me back inside if it got dark too fast, reminding me to eat before leaving again. I reached the end of the street and stopped, realizing I had nowhere to go. I sat on my suitcase and finally allowed myself to cry. silent sobs shaking my body as grief and disbelief crashed together. I called my aunt first, no answer, then a cousin, excuses. Everyone suddenly had reasons why I couldn't stay. My father's words echoed in my head. Life isn't kind. I wondered if my mother had known this moment would come, if that was why she always held me a little tighter, loved me a little louder. By dawn, I ended up at my friend Sarah's place. She opened the door in pajamas, shock and anger flashing across her face as soon as she saw my bags. "He kicked you out," she asked. I nodded, unable to speak. She pulled me into a hug without another word. For the first time since my mother died, I felt warmth again. But it didn't last long. Grief doesn't rest just because someone offers you a couch. Days turned into sleepless nights. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying my father's expression, cold, almost relieved. I realized then that my mother had been the only thing holding our family together. Without her, my father didn't see a daughter. He saw a burden. I tried to go back once, just once. I stood across the street watching the house. The curtains were drawn. My mother's flowers were gone from the porch, replaced by nothing. I imagined her voice telling me not to beg, not to shrink myself for someone who couldn't love me properly. So I didn't knock. Instead, I found work, any work. I took extra shifts, skipped meals, saved every coin. Pride hurt, but hunger hurt more. I learned how heavy independence could be when it came wrapped in rejection. Each night, I whispered to my mother's photo on my phone, asking her how to survive a world she had always softened for me. One evening, my father called. "Have you found a place yet?" he asked, his tone casual, as if we were discussing the weather. "I'm managing," I replied quietly. "Good," he said. "I'm clearing out some of your mother's things. If you want anything, come get it tomorrow." My chest tightened. "You're throwing her things away. They're just reminders," he snapped. "I'm moving on." I wanted to scream. Instead, I said nothing. That night, I cried harder than I had at the funeral, not just for my mother, but for the truth I couldn't ignore anymore. The man who was supposed to protect me had chosen cruelty the moment compassion became inconvenient. The next day, I didn't go back. I chose survival over humiliation. Weeks later, when I finally rented a tiny room with peeling paint and a broken heater, I unpacked my bag slowly. It wasn't home, but it was mine. I placed my mother's scarf on the chair and sat beside it, breathing in the last traces of her. "I'll be okay," I whispered, forcing the words to become real. I didn't know it yet, but every tear, every sleepless night, every act of quiet endurance was shaping something stronger inside me. My father thought he had erased me. What he didn't realize was that he had only pushed me toward the truth, and toward a future he would never be prepared for. The letter arrived on a rainy afternoon, the kind of rain that soaked through clothes and memories alike. I had just come back from a double shift, my feet aching, my spirit worn thin. The tiny room I rented smelled faintly of damp walls and instant noodles. When I checked the mailbox, I almost ignored the thick envelope tucked between unpaid bills and advertisements. My name, written neatly across the front, made my breath catch. It was from a law office. For a long moment, I just stood there, rain dripping from my hair, heart pounding like it already knew something I didn't. My first thought was fear. Had my father done something? Was this another way to remind me that I no longer belonged anywhere? I carried the letter upstairs with shaking hands, set it on the table, and stared at it, as if opening it might change everything. In a way, it did. "You are requested to attend the formal reading of your late mother's will." I sank into the chair, my legs giving out beneath me. A will, my father had told me there was nothing left, that everything was his responsibility now. For days after my mother's death, he had acted like a man who already owned the world. Why would there be a will that I didn't know about? That night, sleep refused to come. I kept remembering small moments, my mother asking oddly specific questions about my future, her quiet conversations with strangers on the phone, the way she once said, "Even when I'm not here, I'll still be protecting you." I had thought it was just comfort. Now it felt like a promise. The law office was quiet and formal, its walls lined with books that smelled of dust and authority. My father was already there when I arrived, sitting comfortably, dressed well, confidence written all over his posture. When he saw me, his expression hardened. "What are you doing here?" he asked sharply. "I got a letter," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. He scoffed. "This is just a formality. Don't get your hopes up." We sat in silence until the lawyer entered. An older man with calm eyes, he offered polite nods before opening a folder thick with papers. As he began reading, my heart pounded louder with every word. My mother had planned carefully, thoughtfully, leaving personal items to relatives, small donations to causes she loved. My father listened impatiently, tapping his fingers, waiting for the part he believed belonged to him. Then the lawyer paused. "The residential property," he said slowly, "along with all financial assets registered under the late Mrs. S. name, are to be transferred in full to her daughter." The room went still. My father's fingers froze mid-tap. "What?" he barked. "That can't be right." The lawyer continued calmly. "There is a condition attached. In the event that the husband removes, mistreats, or emotionally abandons the daughter after the wife's passing, all rights to shared property are immediately forfeited." I felt tears streaming down my face before I even realized I was crying. My father stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is ridiculous. I'm her husband, and you violated the condition." The lawyer replied evenly. "You forced your daughter out of the home 3 days after your wife's death." Silence swallowed the room. My mother had known. She had seen the cruelty behind closed doors, the way love in that house depended on her presence. She had prepared for the worst, and in doing so, saved me. In that moment, grief twisted into something bittersweet. Even in death, she had chosen me. My father looked at me then, truly looked, and for the first time, fear replaced arrogance. "She never told me," he whispered. I wiped my tears and met his gaze. "She didn't have to." The lawyer explained the next steps, but I barely heard him. My hands rested over my heart, trying to contain the overwhelming rush of gratitude and sorrow. I wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. As I walked out of the office, rain began to fall again, but this time it felt cleansing. My mother's final gift wasn't just a house or money. It was proof that I had never been as alone as I thought. The day the house officially became mine, I stood across the street and looked at it for a long time. The paint was slightly faded, the windows familiar in a way that made my chest ache, but it no longer felt like a place I had been exiled from. It felt like something I had survived to reclaim. The keys were cold in my palm, heavier than metal, heavy with memory, loss, and justice that had arrived without me ever having to beg for it. My father was given 30 days to leave. When the lawyer told him, his face drained of color. The confidence that once wrapped around him like armor disappeared, replaced by something small and desperate. He argued at first, raised his voice, accused everyone of betrayal, but legal truth doesn't bend to anger. The documents were clear. My mother had been precise. She had loved quietly, and she had planned brilliantly. During those 30 days, I didn't move back in. I stayed in my small rented room, watching from a distance as my father packed his life into boxes. Neighbors whispered. Relatives suddenly called me, voices filled with regret and forced kindness. People who hadn't answered my calls weeks ago now wanted to check on me. I listened politely and kept my distance. Pain had taught me discernment. On the final day, I arrived at the house early in the morning. My father's car was parked in the driveway, the trunk open. He carried boxes out slowly, his shoulders slumped. For the first time, he looked older not just in years, but in consequence. He saw me and froze. "You've come to watch?" he asked bitterly. "I've come to say goodbye," I replied calmly. He scoffed, but his eyes betrayed him. "Your mother ruined me," he muttered. I shook my head. She protected me. He didn't have an answer for that. As he loaded the last box, he hesitated. "I didn't know she'd do this," he said quietly. "If I had known, you would have treated me better," I asked. He didn't respond. That silence was enough. When he finally drove away, I didn't feel the rush of victory people talk about. I didn't smile or celebrate. I stood in the doorway and let the emptiness wash over me. Revenge hadn't come through shouting or revenge plans. It came through truth, clean, undeniable, and final. I spent the next few weeks restoring the house. I cleaned every corner, opened windows that had been shut, let sunlight pour into rooms that had felt heavy for years. I donated what didn't belong and kept what mattered. In the living room, I placed my mother's photograph on the shelf where she used to keep fresh flowers. I added new ones myself every week. At night, I slept peacefully for the first time since she died. I started rebuilding not just the house, but myself. I went back to school, found better work, and learned to trust my own strength. The fear that once ruled me slowly loosened its grip. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset, I thought about my father, not with hatred but with clarity. He had mistaken control for power and cruelty for strength. My mother had understood something deeper. Love is protection even when it's quiet. The greatest revenge wasn't taking the house, it was becoming whole. I had turned loss into foundation, betrayal into independence, and grief into gratitude. My mother's final lesson echoed in everything I did: prepare, protect, and believe in yourself. Karma didn't knock softly that day. It arrived with documents, truth, and perfect timing, and for the first time, I didn't feel like a daughter abandoned. I felt like a woman chosen by love, guided by memory, and finally at home.